Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for the final Immersive Arts Inspiration Day. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've been touring around the UK to each of the regions to run one of these events in person. But it's really exciting to be able to bring this to a much wider audience today through this online webinar. So my name's Tom Millen. I'm from a company called Crossover Labs, and we're one of the partners that are involved with the Immersive Arts program. Today it's going to look a little bit like this. So we're going to start off with a talk from myself, talking to you about kind of what Immersive Arts currently looks like, then what are the opportunities for yourselves as artists, and then finally we'll be looking at what that means for kind of wider society as a whole. After that, we are going to have an introduction to the funding and how we can support you from Verity McIntosh, Michelle Rumney, and Lisa Heller Jones. And then we'll have a little break, about 10 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask us some questions at the end. So the Q&A isn't open for now. We're going to open it at the end of those funding questions because hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered in the details of the upcoming session. Today's session is going to be in English, but if you would prefer to communicate with us in Welsh for the Q&A, please type your questions in Welsh in the Q&A box and we'll respond to those in Welsh. So this morning, to begin my talk, it's going to be a bit of a barrage of examples, ideas, and information. But the objective of it is to offer you lots and lots of potential endpoints by throwing you lots of different examples, where hopefully you'll be able to find something within that that excites you and interests you enough to go and seek out a little bit more about immersive arts for yourself. It's supposed to be an inspirational talk. I don't know about that, but at the very least, you're hopefully going to see some examples that might pique your interest. So the Immersive Arts Programme is a new funding programme that is designed to support artists to make and share immersive art. It's taking place over the next 3 years, and we are supporting artists with £3.6 million worth of grant funding, as well as additional support, events and training beyond that. The programme's funded by the Arts Councils of the United Kingdom, so Arts Council Northern Ireland, Arts Council England, Arts Council Wales, and Creative Scotland, as well as the AHRC. And it's the first time that all of those organisations have come together to fund something in this way. So it's innovative in more than one way. And the programme itself is delivered by a consortium of incredible people and organisations. It's led out of the Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol, and then across the UK there's a partner organisation in each country. So in Scotland there is Cryptic, in Northern Ireland there is the Nerve Centre, and in Wales the Wales Millennium Centre. And then they, together with research partners from University of West of England and the University of Bristol. And then there are several national partners as well who are working across the entire programme. So those include Unlimited, who are looking at diversity along with the XRDI, and then looking at the networking between creatives is the Immersive Tech Network, and then finally Crossover Labs, who are delivering the training and events program. So as I mentioned, Crossover Labs is where I'm from, and we're called that because we are interested in the crossover between different art forms, research and technology, and we mostly operate across 3 arms. So we curate work, we run labs and training programs, and then we make our own productions ourselves. So in terms of our curation, it might look a bit like this. So on the left here, you can see a virtual reality cinema program that we curated for Copenhagen Docs in Denmark. So we work a lot with kind of different film festivals, putting together programs of immersive work. We also curate large-scale public digital art installations. As you can see in the middle here, that's in a festival called Silbersalz in Halle in Germany. And we have our own festival called Electric Dreams that takes place every year at Adelaide Fringe in Australia. And that is a festival where we're investigating routes to market for immersive arts, where they're up against things like cabaret and circus and comedy. And we're trying to encourage people out of the heat of the Australian summer into a dark room to put on a virtual reality headset or experience some immersive art. And then we were initially set up as a training organization, hence the labs in our name. So initially, you might have had a lab a little bit like the one on the left here. So this is a lab we ran for commissioners at Channel 4 back in 2010, where we were getting them to come together and innovate around this thing called the internet, in order to kind of get them to realize that the audiences of their future would probably be watching their content online uh, rather than on the TVs in their living rooms. And I think we've probably proved right in that regard. And we continue to run these programs where we bring different sorts of creatives together around a piece of technology. So recently we ran a lab for Indigenous artists and creatives in Australia, where we were getting them to kind of innovate around virtual reality, seeing what that meant for their practice. And then finally, we run kind of professional development programs. So people applying with ready project ideas at one stage or another, and we kind of hone those ideas in order to take them to the next level, whether that's getting them market ready, getting them prototype ready, or getting them all the way through to realization and reaching audiences. And then we make things as well. So we've now produced a series of 9 live cinema archive films. And these are collaborations between archivists, film directors, and contemporary musicians. And ones where we kind of give equal creative weighting and control to each of those roles within that grouping. So in the middle there, you can see Jarvis Cocker conducting a orchestra in front of the film The Big Melt at the Crucible in Sheffield. Um, and that's how these films are really designed to be performed. They're designed to be performed with the band playing live, but they've also been broadcast on TV, been shown in salt caves and at music festivals. You see on the right, that's Latitude Festival, and they've been shown at MOMA in New York as well. And of course, we don't just produce films, we also produce immersive work ourselves. So our immersive work is always a kind of collaboration between one or more art forms and some sort of technology, I'd say. So on the left, that's Easter Rising. It was a virtual reality documentary and the BBC's first original documentary commission for VR. In the middle, this is a picture from a performance by the electronic music DJs Mirtavich and Tharuda, who are 2 Indian DJs that we've been part of a long-term collaboration with, where we have been digitizing objects and archives here in the UK of South Indian culture, and then sending it to them, and they've been kind of hacking it together with AI and game engines in order to kind of create these spectacular visuals and installations that kind of offer a Indo-futurist perspective on kind of a universe that has forgotten about culture in the future. And then finally, we produced Karen Palmer's Consensus Gentium, which won the XR Award at South by Southwest last year. And that is a experience for iPhone that's set in a dystopian near future where a social credit system has been enacted and you need to be able to kind of download this app onto your phone in order to get access to different areas of London. But the app uses the front-facing camera to track your eye gaze, and depending on where you're looking on the screen and your facial expressions, it branches the narratives in different ways. So I guess in summary, we do a whole variety of things, but basically where arts and tech meet, that's kind of where we find ourselves. So today, we're going to start out by looking a bit at the what is immersive art. What do we mean by it as a program? Then we'll look at the what if. So what are the possibilities for immersive art for your own practice? And then what does that mean for wider society and for art more generally? So we'll start with the what here, and we've actually got a definition that we've come up with for this immersive arts program. We've defined immersive art as art that uses technology to actively involve the audience and that bridges physical and digital spaces. So I think you'll agree that there's an amount of room for interpretation here. And I think the reasons for that will hopefully become clear as I kind of move on with this presentation. But there are many definitions of what immersive art might be, but this is our program's particular definition. So what does immersive art look like? Well, a big part of it might include kind of something called XR or extended reality. And some of you are probably familiar with this term or have heard it about. But the main thing that you need to know is that XR is really just a catch-all term for three R's underneath it. And those are virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So we can have a look at those in a bit more detail. So in terms of virtual reality, these are projects where you're pretty much always wearing a headset, and the physical world is completely non-existent to you. You're completely immersed in a digital world. So this is an example of a piece called We Live in an Ocean of Air by Marshmallow Laser Feast. And here the participant is wearing the headset and they are entirely immersed in this digital world, right? The projections behind them, they can't see them. That's just there to make nice press shots. Augmented reality is where we're actually putting a digital overlay over the real world in order to create like a composite image. So this is the Gilded Cage AR from Weiwei. It's a digitized version of his Gilded Cage sculpture, and it's part of a series of artworks that have been touring botanical gardens around the world. So here you're using a personal device like an iPad or a phone, and you're pointing it out in front of you, and a digital object is kind of being overlaid onto the world. You'll be familiar with things like Pokemon Go, which uses augmented reality. And then finally, mixed reality, which is a kind of combination between the two, I guess. But the important thing about mixed reality is that you're often still wearing a headset, but these are projects where the physical and digital world actually interact with each other, where they're present for each other. So this is a project called Impulse from Anagram, and it's part of a series looking at how we make sense of the world around us. And in this chapter, it's looking at four different people's experience living with ADHD. And what you can see here is the participant is kind of seeing this virtual world in front of her, but that might be actually on a real table. It's like a digital overlay on a real table. So one of those objects might roll across the table, and when it gets to the edge, it could fall off and onto the floor and continue going because it understands the physical world around it, and it's interacting kind of in simpatico. So this XR thing is a big part of immersive arts, but it doesn't have to end there. You might have installations that don't need any personal devices at all. So kind of immersive installations that use mirrors, LEDs, lights, projection, in order to transport you into kind of digital spaces. So this is New Nature at the Dragon Room at Mercer Labs in New York. And what you can see here is a combination of mirrors and 500,000 synchronized LEDs that create like shifting sculptural landscapes around the people as they walk through. You might be familiar with other projects that have been shown at places like Outernet at Tottenham Court Road, or maybe the TeamLab in Japan. And it doesn't have to just be visual either, so we can hack other senses as well to create immersive art. So here, what you're seeing is a theatre play called The Encounter by the theatre company Complicite. And right here in the middle of the screen, you'll see that that head on a stick. That's actually a microphone. It's an ambisonic microphone that the actor is moving around and speaking into and creating kinds of auditory tricks. And the audience are all wearing binaural headphones, and so they're listening to kind of what that head on the stick is hearing. And so he transports you on a trip, becoming lost in the remote Amazon rainforest, but he can do things like breathe into the ear of that microphone, and it makes you feel a little bit like this hot breath on your neck. And we can go beyond sight and sound too. So this is Symbiosis, from the Dutch company Polymorph. This project offers like a speculative future where humanity has had to fuse our biology with other organisms in order to survive a climate catastrophe, basically. And when you enter the piece, you are basically given one of several life forms to inhabit. So when I did this, I was a slime mold, which was nice. But you don one of these suits, and they put a VR headset on you, so you're getting kind of the visual through the VR and some headphones. But the suit itself is actually designed to kind of constrict different parts of your body, or maybe like it's got balloons in it to give you a sense that your skin is bubbling, or like tubes that are full of liquids, so it's like things are running across your skin. And then there's also a little scent receptor thing at the front of the VR headset that's releasing smells to you throughout the experience. You can smell what it's like to be this creature. And then they also feed you little snacks on spoons, so they feed you food throughout the experience as well, in order for you to be able to kind of experience life as this other organism. And then I thought it's important to talk a little bit about kind of live experiences as well, because something that often gets leveled at virtual reality in particular is that you're in your own bubble, like it's a disconnected experience. And that doesn't have to be the case. So this is a play called Draw Me Close that was presented at the National Theatre in 2017. And in it, the audience member wears the headset and is transported into this like black and white illustrated world that you can see illustrated there. And then it's a play for one person at a time with one actor, and she is wearing a motion tracksuit, and she's playing your mother in this experience. So she can hug you, she can hand you things, she can draw with you, and then she can tuck you into bed at the end of the night. So it can be this kind of shared experience together with other people. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of kind of what immersive arts looks like today, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of it. Like, we would love suggestions of kind of other forms of immersive art put forward by yourselves. But there's one thing that's connecting the majority of these experiences, and that's that they're all spatial, right? And they're using spatial computing in order to be able to deliver their experience. And spatial computing is primarily created using the games engine. And this thing of the games engine is this thing that's bringing theatre, it's bringing contemporary art, and bringing kind of entertainment all together kind of around this thing in order to deliver these spatial experiences. So there are now 3.09 billion active gamers worldwide, and that's nearly 40% of the planet. So I think it's fair to say that games and video games are quickly becoming the dominant medium of our era. And I think that this thing called the game engine and the spatial computing, which is driving immersive arts, will likely be the dominant form of expression for the 21st century. And I'm not alone in this. So Hans-Ulrich Obrist, who's the director of the Serpentine, says that video games are to the 21st century what movies were to the 20th century and novels were to the 19th century. So what does this thing called a game engine look like? Well, this is one here. So this is the game engine Unity, and when you first open it up, this is what you see. So you have you kind of have three things. You have this endless space in front of you. So that gray kind of floor, which isn't really a floor, but we'll come to that. A gray floor reaching out towards this endless horizon in front of you, and that horizon doesn't exist either. It's just there to kind of locate you within the space. Then you also get a light source, which is the sun right there in the middle, and you get a camera, which is basically your user's perspective. It's a bit strange that is such a kind of old camera. It's kind of like a sort of referencing the art form before it, I guess, the dominant art form of the 20th century. But basically, what you're looking at here is a space, a 3D dimensional space of unlimited possibilities. And it's basically a space that we can populate with anything. So we can populate it with objects, with characters, with lights, with sounds, with lots of these cameras if we want. And then we get to define the rules that all of those objects abide by. So we can define what are the physical properties of the object. Is it solid? Can you pass through it? What are the physical properties then of a light source? Like what physical properties does this light have? Or even a sound, like we can give sounds physical properties. And what happens when each of those things, objects, sounds, lights, can collide with one another? And you can even define kind of the laws of gravity. It's demonstrated here. So what we're talking about in terms of this game engine is basically a physics engine where we get to either mimic our experience of reality in the real world, or we can break the rules entirely and create entirely new realms of existence. So perhaps at this part, you've seen a couple of examples that might have piqued your interest, but you're wondering what does this actually mean for your practice specifically? And I think the reason that I really love immersive art is that there's this convergence that's happening around this tool called the game engine. And right now, everywhere you look, the game engine's influence is being felt. So you might be familiar with the virtual production techniques used on shows like The Mandalorian. So here you can see that actually the actor is sat in front of a screen. You can just make it out because of the cameras along the top of it. And this backdrop is actually being generated live in a game engine. So the director, if they don't like the light, they can change it right there and then. It's being live rendered. They can add in objects, they can throw in other characters if they want to. This means that actors don't have to sit in front of green screens and talk to balls on sticks anymore. They can actually kind of inhabit the worlds in which they're kind of they're acting within. It's also being used at in music and at music festivals. So Coachella in the US have had AR equipped stages since 2018 now. So originally for like broadcast, but now you can use your phone to kind of take photos for yourself of these augmented reality stages. And we're seeing concerts pop up in video games like Fortnite as well. And then also in journalism, so the collective forensic architecture, which is a team of investigative journalists and architects who basically use 3D modeling and game engines in order to recreate 3D space for their investigative journalism piece, looking at the killing of 6 civilians and 2 ambulance drivers in Gaza. In this piece, the killing of Hind Rajab. And here they pieced all of the clues together from kind of audio evidence, but also drone footage and spatial evidence in order to kind of recreate this as honestly as they possibly could. And of course, artists are discovering its superpowers as well. So the artist Jakob Kudsteensen, who's a Danish artist, creates these worlds basically where these virtual worlds where the world itself is the artwork. So it's sort of like sculpture, but it goes far beyond sculpture because they're creating everything up to the beyond the horizon, up to and beyond the horizon, right? In order to kind of transport you into an artwork. And this is kind of an important thing because our brains actually think in a locative way. When we have a memory or we have a feeling, something happens to us, we often, our brains actually just geotag that memory to the space that we found ourselves in. A good way to kind of recognize this is maybe think of a party that you went to that took place in like one room. It's often a lot harder to piece together the series of events or kind of remember everything that happened within that party rather than one that took place over multiple rooms or multiple venues. Like often you can say, oh yes, and then we went to that room and then it happened in there and then this happened in there. If it all happens in one space, our brains find it a little bit hard to sort it over the course of a night. And there are other superpowers besides this kind of this locative kind of world building as the artwork. So we can also create these narratives where the participant is given agency and like made a willing protagonist in an art piece. So the American theatre company Tender Claws created a series of plays over the pandemic called The Under Presents. This one's still from The Tempest. And in it, you were, well, first you'd get your headset on like a week before, and in order to buy a ticket, you had to trek across a desert and get to a ticket booth, and then like literally buy a ticket from a person who was selling it in the booth, and then you'd come back at the actual show time. And when you came back, it would be you and maybe like 5 other audience members, plus one live actor who was acting from like their living room somewhere in the world. Here you can see, I think that actor's playing Prospero, and the audience all have these kind of masks, and then these kind of silhouettes. And the actor leads you through the story of the Tempest, but you and the other audience members are actually playing most of the roles, and you get to decide how you play those roles, whether you're going to play them at all or whether you're just going to mess about and cause chaos. And that ability to create like kind of live responses and making them your audience a willing protagonist is really powerful. And we can make people active participants in the artwork in other ways as well. So this is a installation from the Finnish artist Hanna Haslahti called Captured. And here you can see this woman stood in front of this kind of monolith that's capturing her face, and then applying it to one of these kind of avatars that are being born into the world on the screen behind the monolith. And when those avatars are being born into that world, they are assigned one of 3 roles. So they either become an aggressor, a victim of those aggressors, or a bystander. And by having a gallery full of people seeing their virtual avatars on the screen in front of them who are taking part in this kind of cycle of violence, it allows us to kind of contemplate our role as maybe bystanders in our day-to-day lives. Similarly, the project that we created with Karen Palmer, Consensus Gentium, which is using the front-facing camera on the phone, is also sort of hacking the viewer's biology in order to make them an active participant in the artwork. So I guess this idea of like virtual reality, when I first came across it just over 10 years ago now, kind of seemed like a funny term to me, because what it felt like it was doing was actually transporting you out of reality. It was more like a virtual irreality. But I've come to see over time that actually that term makes more sense when we start to consider those superpowers that I just referred to. Because our lived experience as humans is both spatial, it's sensory, and it also responds to us. And so doesn't it follow then that our art should also be spatial, sensory, and respond to us? Often in like kind of immersive arts, we might refer to, rather than an audience, we might talk about participants, or we might even talk about immersants. And we don't talk about storytelling, but sometimes we talk about story doing or story living. And I think a kind of a really good example of this idea of like story living happened for me back in 2014 when I was first kind of getting into this area. And it was the best virtual reality experience I ever did, I think, but it didn't involve a VR headset. And it was a project called Door into the Dark by the UK company Anagram. And in it, you first you're blindfolded, and then you're given headphones, and you're given a rope to hold, and you're just given one instruction, which is to follow the rope. And as you follow that rope, there are kind of beacons throughout the space that are triggering stories of people that have found themselves profoundly lost at one time in their lives or another. And you keep on following this rope, and as you do, you're kind of transported into these sets that are creating like this kind of multisensory world. So you're teetering along the edge of a cliff, and then you're going through a jungle, and then you're kind of hop stepping over a river, and then you're climbing on a giant bed as well. And as you go on this journey, eventually you reach the end of the rope, and you're just told now it's time to let go of the rope, and you take this step into the unknown and just kind of like have to, that's it, that's that moment. You let go, and you're it's your story now, and you have to find your way out of this space without the guide that the artist has given you. So immersive arts can create these experiences that are more akin to our experience of reality and transport ourselves into other people's realities. But I think maybe what I'm most excited about in terms of immersive art is that it can break our experience of reality as well. So over the last 6, 7 months, I've been working with a group of researchers based around Europe, in order and pairing them up with artists in order to make their research more approachable and accessible to audiences. And one of these researchers is a woman called Katharina Scherer, and she is a expert, I think, well, probably the expert on the German expressionist sci-fi author called Paul Scherbart. And he was writing around the turn of the 20th century. And he was really inspired by kind of the science that was going on at the time, that was being driven forward by technology. Particularly, he was really interested in breakthroughs in telescopes, so being able to see deeper and deeper into space than we'd ever been able to see before. And people were, for the first time, we were able to actually see the surface of the sun, and we could see these solar flares that were sort of dancing around on the surface of the sun. And Paul Scherbart was super inspired by this. He kind of imagined them as like these beings on the surface of the sun. And as a result, he kind of was starting to think about what other forms of life might exist out there in the universe. And these are some of his illustrations, where he was kind of drawing the things he was writing about. But what he was really, in his writing, what he really does is kind of push himself and the audience to imagine unimaginable life forms and beings. So like life forms that are entire planets or entire landscapes, for example. And I like I connected to kind of the way he was looking at the universe, because rather than pushing the back, kind of creating sci-fi writing of the time that was looking at kind of imagining alien worlds that were quite similar to our own, which were like basically I did worlds for colonization. He was looking at ones where you could push the boundaries of imagination as far as possible and to think about the unimaginable. So Paul Scherbart was really working with the tools that he had available to him at the time, which was writing his novels and also doing these illustrations. But I think if he was writing today or working today, he would probably be using immersive arts in order to do these, create these beings, ones that are spatial and sensory and would respond to us in some way, or maybe not. And then I was having a little think about like, okay, if what is the kind of VR experience that I've seen that kind of breaks reality the most for me? And I came up with this one. So this is a project called Fight. It's a virtual reality experience by the artist Memo Acten. And what you're seeing here on the screen is actually the left and right eye of a virtual reality headset. So what the artist does is he feeds in two different images into the left and right eye and basically makes your brain fight to work out what the hell they're seeing in front of us, in front of it. And I love this because it challenges our perception of reality entirely, and it forces us into like having this experience that is entirely unhuman. Our brains aren't programmed to think this way at all. So, I mean, in terms of kind of thinking about Paul Scherbart and then looking at this kind of these these ways of seeing the world that wouldn't be possible in any other medium. Maybe what we're talking about here is actually a new artistic movement, and an artistic movement that's driven by tech. And it won't be the first one in history to have been driven by technological innovations. Often these new movements have offered us these kind of new ways of seeing that I'm describing in terms of Memo's work. So during the Renaissance, innovations in oil paint allowed artists to create more detailed and natural representations of the world around us. And the deeper colors, together with the sheen that you're able to achieve with oil paint, allowed artists to kind of capture the glow of light in a much more natural way than they'd ever been able to with kind of matte painting before. And you see this kind of movements driven by technological innovations all the way through from kind of grinding and blending substances, the cave painting through to the invention of the camera, in the 19th century. And I'm not alone in kind of recognizing immersive arts as a new movement or kind of medium. Um, David Olusoga, the broadcaster and historian, was writing in a column for The Guardian where he was talking about the difference between XR and TV. And what he says is this. He says that television is an old medium with a long established internal culture, one that developed over the decades and from the outset was exclusive rather than inclusive. A new medium has arrived in the world with no history and to an extent, no cultural baggage. The original sins of Britain's television and film industries, their exclusivity, their metropolitan focus, their tendency to privilege middle-class outlooks, and their long histories of misogyny should and potentially can be left behind and prevented from infecting VR and AR. Now, I think that's a pretty good mission for a new medium and movement to have at its heart. But how are we going to achieve that? Well, I think that the answer is that we're going to do that together, because hopefully what I've demonstrated is that there's a whole load of different art forms kind of converging around this platform, which is the game engine and spatial computing, and I think that by smashing silos between all those art forms and collaborating with this thing called the game engine means that we can maybe have a chance at creating this version of the world that David Olusoga is imagining. The great thing about this convergence about this thing on this thing called the game engine means that there's so much space to play together, because there's literally, like I showed you before, there's like limitless space within the game engine to play and collaborate. And we've been experimenting with this ourselves at Crossover. So in 2023 at the Adelaide Fringe, we produced a production called Torrent, and it was actually brought together in about 4 weeks entirely over Zoom, kind of with collaborators all around the world. But in it, the audience sat in the middle of the room, and then they were surrounded by LED screens. And it was a dance piece where the dancers danced around the audience, and they had virtual avatars behind them that were animated kind of live. And this was like a really it was a really powerful piece, and I think that the reason it was so powerful was we had lots of different art forms kind of converging on it at the same time. So we worked with a UK-based studio called Megaverse to do the digital effects, and then we worked with a dance company called the Lewis Major Dance Company in Australia. We worked with an indigenous poet called Ali Cobby Eckerman, who wrote the narrative and the words, and we worked with electronic musicians called Yardnewell, based in Leeds. And the great thing about this piece, and the thing that I think made it so powerful, was that actually what we ended up with in the end was this thing that was so much more than just a poem on its own, or a dance piece on its own, or a VFX show, or the musical composition on its own. What we had was something where people had come in and had equal control in order to play and experiment and create this kind of quite joyful experience of people coming together in order to make a creative endeavor. So hopefully now you might be able to see an opportunity within immersive arts for your own practice. And at the very least, maybe there have been some examples that might have piqued your interest and you want to look into a little bit more. But now I just want to move on a bit. And if we've established this idea of immersive arts as a movement, an artistic movement, I want to see what that means for our society as a whole, and also especially a society that finds itself in quite a lot of turmoil right now. So Olivia Laing, the author and essayist, described the power of art in order to change the world a couple of years ago, when she was talking about its kind of importance in turbulent political times. She says that we're so often told that art can't really change anything, but I think it can. It shapes our ethical landscapes. It opens us up to the interior lives of others. It is a training ground for possibility. It makes plain inequalities, and it offers other ways of living. So I think a really good example of this is the TV program Mr. Bates, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And that was a TV program, that a creative endeavor that after it was released had an actual kind of impact on policy and had caused actual societal change. But obviously, Mr. Bates was broadcast on primetime TV. It had a huge amount of marketing behind it, and then it also had this whole kind of press thing that was swirling around it. But it did change things. So maybe the challenge that we face as artists actually is not that art can't change the world. It's actually that we need to get attention for the work that we're making. And in order to maybe try and solve this, we can look at a few people who are in the business of kind of grabbing our attention. So I'm going to start with economics because money talks, right? So I'm sure some of you are familiar with this idea of the attention economy. It was posited by an economist called Herbert A. Simon. And what he says is that in an information-rich world, the wealth of information, i.e. the internet, means that there is a dearth of something else. There's a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. And what information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients, right? Because we're looking and spending time reading this information. So a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Matt Locke of the comms agency Story Things in London goes a bit further. He says that actually audiences don't have shorter attention spans these days, which is something that often gets kind of leveled at audiences. We know that's not the case because we have content like long form YouTube videos and video games that last like 60 to 120 hours. Like it's not a short attention span, actually. What they have is short decision-making spans. He talks about this in reference to kind of the format. People want to know kind of what they're getting into when they're going to assign their attention within this kind of attention poor kind of economy that we find ourselves in. So this information-rich world with its poverty of attention means that we actually just have to choose how to allocate all of that attention effectively. And what that means is that the bright and the loud and the sexy move to the center, and anything difficult and complex is pushed to the periphery. And this is actually known in social psychological circles as something called cognitive closure. And it basically just describes the human desire for clear answers and resolutions as fast as possible. Our brains are just craving quick, decisive answers, not the ambiguity and investment that maybe going and seeing an exhibition or reading a novel might entail. Instead, that like bold, brash headline in the format that you understand and you're familiar with on your social media feed is going to capture your attention, rather than kind of engaging with maybe a digital artwork. But Byung-Chul Han, a Korean philosopher, also recognizes this. He says that the smooth is the signature of the present time. It connects the sculptures of Jeff Koons, iPhones, and Brazilian waxing. Why do we today find what is smooth beautiful? Beyond its aesthetic value, it reflects a general social imperative. It embodies today's society of positivity. What is smooth does not injure, nor does it offer any resistance. And I think this is true in terms of kind of social media. It's something that thrives on this idea of cognitive closure, of offering the path of least resistance, and keeping you within your bubble of things that aren't going to injure you, right? But what it's doing is we're avoiding any kind of ambiguity, which is the essence of art, I think. So this is a bit of a silly slide. The one on the left says that billionaires see VR as a way to avoid radical social change, and the one on the right says virtual reality for chickens would simulate a blissful free-range life. But it's here for a reason because of the guy and the headset that he's wearing on the left there. So that's Mark Zuckerberg. And I think it's important for us to realize that like these XR devices that we're talking about and the delivery methods for immersive art are being designed by smartphone manufacturers and social media companies like Facebook. They are stylistic devices at their heart, and they're designed to be attention grabbing. These people are in the business of keeping your attention on your device. And these are the devices that we're talking about as like delivery methods for this new art form of immersive arts. So I guess what I'm saying is that maybe we can push back and save the world with the devices that have been sent to destroy us. And I'm not necessarily the first person to recognize that superpower. So I think the documentary worlds and the impact space have already hit on this superpower a long time ago. So this is a picture of a project called the Clouds Over Cedar being shown at the World Economic Forum back in 2015. So lots of decision makers and kind of politicians there with this project on their face. And this project was kind of seminal within the VR documentary space, and it caused Chris Milk, one of the creators of this, to do a famous TED talk where he referred to virtual reality as the empathy machine. The other creator of this piece, Gabo Aurora, at the time was working for the UN in their video production unit. And what he would do in the face of any kind of humanitarian crisis he would send out a video team. They would film, they'd get some footage, and then they would release that footage online with a call for donations to help with the humanitarian crisis. And they would get X amount of views and they would get X amount of donations. And then a couple of weeks later, they'd get a celebrity ambassador to sit in front of that footage. And then they would release it on YouTube again. They'd get more views and they would get more donations. Then they created this virtual reality piece and started touring it to places like the World Economic Forum, but also train stations and public. And what they were seeing was actually that they were getting far fewer views because of the delivery method, but people were donating a much higher percentage of the time. So actually what we were seeing was something that was transforming people's behaviors. They were seeing the same content, but it was a different delivery method that was actually transforming their behavior and making them donate more to the cause. So this immersive arts thing, with its kind of story living, can transform our behaviors. So is it transformational? Well, we can go back to economics to talk about this again. So in the early 90s, these two economists called Pine and Gilmore posited this idea of the experience economy. And what the experience economy means is that basically towards the late 80s, early 90s, the Western world was starting to move away from a service economy and into an economy driven by experiences. So we can look at coffee as an example here, but basically with coffee, you extract a commodity, so the coffee bean, and then you turn that into a good, and that good is the dried coffee bean, maybe it's ground up, and then you deliver it as a service. So the service is a cup of coffee at a coffee shop. But then what was happening was actually that the product was moving on from that cup of coffee to the coffee shop itself. So this was the time that kind of Starbucks was growing in popularity, but people were going to the coffee shop to meet a friend. They were going to just wait for a train or do some work or go and read a book, just enjoy the kind of vibe of the coffee shop entirely. And so the coffee became transactionary, and the experience of being in the coffee shop was actually what you were paying for. And that was this kind of movement into the experience economy. Pine and Gilmore recently in 2020 posited a new step on this evolution. And this is the idea of the transformation economy. So people don't just want experiences anymore. What they want is experiences that are going to have long-lasting positive impacts on their life or health. So it's not just coffee anymore. It's coffee that's going to make you healthier, happier, and more focused than ever before. And we can see this. So this idea of this transformation economy, I first heard about in a talk delivered by a guy called Vince Cadlebeck, who is part of Meow Wolf in the US. And Meow Wolf create these huge immersive kind of theatrical experiences in old abandoned buildings. They're a little bit Punch Drunk-esque, but if Punch Drunk was on LSD. So this project is their first piece called The House of Eternal Return. And Vince talks about this as a piece where they were kind of, this was their first foray into making these psychedelic installations, and really like the objective was to get people to come along to experience it, and they were paying a ticket, so they were this was a kind of commercial endeavor to transport these people into these worlds and make money. But what was happening was that when people were coming out of the experience, they started saying that it was life-changing, and that it was transformational, it transformed them in some way. And Vince was like, huh, this is quite interesting. Like, this wasn't necessarily what we were expecting from this kind of trippy LSD world that we created. And he was talking to these people a bit more, and he realized that this moment that they were talking about, where they were saying it was life-changing and transformational, is something that he dubbed the fridge moment. So in the experience, when you first enter, you are in this like 1950s Americana style home, and the family have disappeared. And you're kind of going around, you're opening up tins, going through drawers, and finding like little clues that start talking about a parallel universe. And as you explore a bit more, eventually you get to the fridge. And when you open the fridge, instead of groceries in front of you, you see a long tunnel of light. And if you step through that tunnel and go to the end, you're transported into this amazing kind of psychedelic world filled with like these weird creatures and these amazing landscapes. And what he realized was that this moment of people stepping through the fridge and making the choice to go down that corridor was giving them this sense of transformational kind of experience. It was literally giving them self-determination and agency, and that was life-changing in itself. For me, like, this was a similar experience to the one that I had with Anagram back in 2016 with Door into the Dark. That experience of getting to the end of the rope and being told to let go and step into the unknown. It's that kind of transformational story living experience that I think immersive arts is one of immersive arts' most powerful superpowers. So just going back to this graph for a second, you can actually see that as well as these like steps up in terms of kind of customization, making a more premium product, there are also these steps down that can lead to commoditization. And what Pine and Gilmore say about this is that brands that stage experiences alone without considering how these experiences can change customers will eventually see their experiences become commoditized. So I kind of thought, okay, as a little exercise, what does this look like for immersive arts? Well, maybe some of you might be familiar with the Van Gogh Alive experience. Are you sure it was Van Gogh Alive, or was it the Van Gogh immersive experience? Or maybe it was the Beyond Van Gogh, the immersive experience, or Inside Van Gogh, perhaps, or From Vermeer to Van Gogh, or maybe the original immersive Van Gogh exhibit. But jokes aside, I do think that immersive arts has these profound transformational qualities that we're only beginning to understand. And I think audiences are growing for this stuff, and they're beginning to understand kind of how to come at it. And we're well placed to succeed, because immersive arts, after all, attention grabbing, they're silo smashing, they're experiential, and they're also transformational. So Roy Amara, who's the former president for the Institute for the Future, came up with this idea of Amara's law about 25 years ago. And what this basically demonstrates is the relationship between actual technological change and the impact it has on our lives, and how we as humans think about technological change. So the pink line in the middle is how humans basically think about the impact that technology is going to have on our lives. And then the black S-curve is the actual effect that technology is having on our lives. So also, what you can see is in the short run, there's a lot of hype. We expect that it's going to have this huge impact on us. But then in the long run, actually, we underestimate that kind of the impact that any technology is going to have on us. So basically what this graph says is that social change is slower than technological change. So what Amara's law says in terms of immersive arts is that we should not expect to see the immediate global effects of immersive, yet we will certainly see it sooner than many people think. And I think probably right now with immersive art, we're just to the right of the transition point on this curve where people are beginning to underestimate the impact that it's going to have on our lives. And we've been here before. So, oops, this is the Daily Mail in the year 2000. James Chapman writes that the internet may just be a passing fad as millions give up on it. This cycle of like high expectations followed by this misplaced cynicism is a syndrome. It's a human syndrome. So what I'm kind of encouraging you to do here is not be James Chapman. So William Gibson, the father of the cyberpunk genre, recognized Amara's law, and he said that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I bring back the example of Elsewhere in India, the project that we're working on with the two Indian artists and DJs. Because without people like Gibson, firstly, their project probably wouldn't exist. Like it's very much inspired by kind of cyberpunk aesthetics and ideas. But also because what Amara's law talks about is this wide scale social change. But actually, what Mirtavich and Tharuda are doing are working away in the fringes and trying to innovate around what this kind of new art form might look like and what it might be. And that's because I think that when you want to see what that wide scale societal change that Amara's law is talking about, what that might look like in the future, actually, you've got to look into those seeds of change that are being planted by small communities of innovators, whether that's in technology, whether it's in research, or whether it's in the arts. So if we're looking at what those communities are doing now in order to drive kind of that wider wedge of societal change in the future, that's all well and good, but also why don't we just do it ourselves? Or why don't you do it yourselves? So I started off this section talking about the tumultuous times that we currently find ourselves in. And I love this quote from Ilya Prigozhin, who is a quantum physicist and known as the godfather of chaos theory. He says that when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence have the capacity to shift the entire system. And our systems, both technological and social, are in a period of great disequilibrium right now. And so I guess this is my call to you as a new movement of immersive artists who are working together to create those small islands of coherence, using technology to create transformational worlds and experiences that either reflect our reality or just break them entirely, and with the power to disrupt the entire system. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully that's given you a bit of impetus and a bit of something within there that gets you kind of curious enough to want to explore this for yourself.